2,000 years ago, Corinth was the most volatile trade city in the entire Mediterranean. Situated on a massive trade route, it was a hyper-competitive hub built by immigrants, retired soldiers, and newly freed people looking to get rich quick. The city operated on the Roman patron-client system. Wealthy elites bankrolled extravagant public works, but it was a calculated transaction. They paid for infrastructure specifically to buy public honor, loyalty, and relentless praise from their citizens. Take a look at this stone block. Civic donors literally carved their resumes into the city streets, permanently publicizing their wealth and their achievements for everyone to see. In Corinthian society, your worth was easily calculated. If you had money, if you looked good, and if you could dominate a public debate with aggressive rhetoric, you mattered. If you lacked those things, you were a nobody. Into this status-obsessed culture walks the Apostle Paul. He wasn't a polished aristocrat. He was a gritty, blue-collar tent maker. Yet, against the odds, he managed to establish a thriving Christian community right in the middle of the city. But shortly after Paul leaves to continue his travels, the Corinthian church is hijacked. A new group of rival teachers rolls into town. They are so smooth and confident that Paul later mockingly labels them the super apostles. These rivals knew exactly how to play the Corinthian game. They carried padded letters of recommendation, demanded massive speaking fees to prove their professional worth, and captivated audiences with tales of ecstatic spiritual visions. Once they had the crowd's attention, they turned on Paul. They mocked his unimpressive physical presence, his lack of rhetorical flair, and the fact that his ministry consisted mostly of poverty, beatings, and public humiliations. To save his fractured community, Paul fires back with the letter we call 2 Corinthians. He refuses to fight them by trying to prove he is stronger or richer. Instead, he dismantles their entire worldview by redefining what strength actually is. The super-apostles relied on projecting a flawless, invincible exterior. Paul counters this with an absurd image for an ambitious Corinthian, a cheap container. He compares himself to these unglazed terracotta pots. They were highly fragile and totally disposable, the ancient equivalent of a cardboard box. Paul tells the Corinthians that the message of the gospel is a priceless, cosmic treasure, but God intentionally places it inside these easily broken human vessels. By separating the value of the message from the status of the messenger, Paul makes a radical claim. Human weakness is a feature designed to ensure the power-changing lives comes from God, rather than the slick presentation of the speaker. Having established that concept, Paul decides to temporarily play the super-apostles' game. He steps into a sarcastic rhetorical trap known as the fool's speech, offering his own resume to compare it to his rivals. In a sarcastic comparison, the left side tallies the standard ancient brag sheet, wealth and civic titles. On the right, Paul lists his credentials, a catalog of absolute failures. He proudly tallies physical traumas, beatings, a stoning, 3 shipwrecks, and constant starvation. He caps it off with a sharp mockery of military glory. Roman soldiers won massive acclaim for being the first to scale a city wall. But Paul boasts about hiding in a basket and being lowered down a massive stone wall like this one, sneaking away to save his life. By taking experiences Corinthian society viewed as deeply shameful and holding them up as greatest achievements, Paul completely disarms their toxic status system, making their obsession with prestige look ridiculous. But the super-apostles had one final claim to superiority, their intense spiritual clout. They bragged constantly about experiencing private revelations and ecstatic visions of heaven. Paul admits experiencing mind-bending visions, but refuses to dwell on them. Instead, he pivots to an agonizing affliction he calls a thorn in the flesh. We don't know exactly what this affliction was, but it was excruciating. Paul begged God 3 times to remove the pain, but was only told that divine power is made perfect in weakness. Paul values the persistence of this thorn because it prevents him from becoming proud. The constant pain ensures he remains humble and reliant on a power outside his own ego. He organizes a massive financial collection, moving wealth from Corinth across the Mediterranean to assist impoverished believers in Jerusalem. This generosity stood in sharp contrast to the super-apostles, who were busy collecting money from the Corinthians strictly to line their own pockets. Paul didn't demand the money through authority. He presented the collection as a test. Seeing the Corinthians actually part with their wealth to help strangers in another province showed whether they had truly moved past the status-seeking culture of their neighbors. In a culture driven by wealth and public status, Paul's message cut against the grain of everything the ancient world valued. For anyone living in a society driven by those same metrics, 2 Corinthians remains a manifesto proving that leadership is grounded in service, and true power is perfected in weakness.